Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Russia says renewing the New START nuclear treaty with the US by February 2026 looks unlikely, slamming Trump's $175 billion Golden Dome defense plan as destabilizing, blaming ruined ties. Meanwhile, the treaty is set to expire on February 2026 next year. Russia says it has responded as Russia launched over 400 drones and 40 missiles at Ukraine overnight, killing 4 people and injuring 49, according to Kyiv. The attack has caused massive damage. Meanwhile, Ukraine has called for immediate pressure on Russia following the deadly strikes. Elon Musk slammed Trump's $2.4 trillion tax bill, prompting Trump to call him very disappointing and threaten contract, sparking a feud over contracts and impeachment that now threatens the US space program. Yet the two still plan to talk this Friday. Hamas has signaled that they are ready to enter into new serious peace talks for a permanent ceasefire with Israel. Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that Israel has activated some clans in Gaza who are opposed to Hamas. The European Council Chief Antonio Costa has urged the US to lift sanctions on 4 ICC judges, stressing that the EU strongly supports the court's independence and its fight against impunity. In contrast, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Trump administration praised the sanctions. On the eve of Eid al-Adha, Israel has launched airstrikes in Lebanon's capital's southern suburbs, targeting Hezbollah's drone production site, according to media reports. Iran has condemned this attack, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baqali stating that blatant act of aggression against Lebanon's territorial integrity and sovereignty. President Donald Trump says he will visit China after speaking to their leader Xi Jinping over the phone. The White House confirmed the two had a very good talk amid heightened tensions after Trump launched a trade war and a series of reciprocal tariffs. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz warned that some US lawmakers underestimate Germany's military buildup. After meeting US President Trump, he backed a NATO spending hike to 5% of GDP and welcomed Trump's promise to keep US troops in Germany. Russia says the last remaining nuclear arms agreement with the United States is close to collapse. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov has declared that reviving the New START treaty is now increasingly unrealistic. The treaty, which expires in 8 months, limits both nations from expanding their strategic nuclear arsenals. Ryabkov blames the US for destabilizing global security. He pointed to Washington's global Golden Dome missile defense plan as a major obstacle to future arms control. He said the current state of US-Russia ties is in ruins. At the same time, Russia's nuclear cooperation had asked IAEA Chief Grossi to mediate with the US on nuclear fuel at Zaporizhzhia plant. He said start-up depends on removing military threats, confirmed plant safety, and mentioned construction of a floating water supply station to support operations. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says Russia's military actions in Ukraine are a response to what it calls terrorist acts by the Kyiv regime. This comes after a massive overnight assault on Ukraine, where Moscow fired over 400 drones and 40 missiles. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged the West to act decisively. He's calling for more air defense systems, long-range striking power, and swifter sanctions. Zelensky warned that delayed action will only encourage Russia to escalate further. In the US, Senator Lindsey Graham confirmed the Senate will move forward next week on a bill imposing new sanctions against Moscow. As tensions escalate, nuclear diplomacy hangs in the balance. Now we have guest Martin Saerites. He's an international affairs expert joining us live from Quito, Ecuador. Thank you for joining us today. What does Russia gain by declaring the treaty increasingly unrealistic with 8 months left on the clock?
I think the relationship between the US and NATO is getting, it's not easy because right now we have the Chancellor of Germany not trusting the US. And even though he's not trusting the US, he knows Germany is going to be dependent for the next couple of years from the US. And now Trump is going to ask NATO for 5% of the income of every country to increase uh, Bellic strength against Russia. So I think right now we're in a situation that Europe needs to do a decision whether they're going to be independent or they're going to strengthen their relationship with the US against Russia.
And according to you, is the US Golden Dome missile defense plan a legitimate security threat to Russia or a pretext to walk away from treaty obligations?
I think the U.S. is concerned about its own security, and I think is a legit question because right now we're seeing that Russia is not longer interested in talking about a treaty, a ceasefire treaty between Ukraine and Russia, and I think the U.S. is really concerned about a huge threat of a third world war, and I think they think deterrence can be achieved by strength, and they want to increase their power. They see that NATO in the last years have been decreasing their power worldwide, while Russia and China they are getting more closer, and they're getting closer and more efficient. And I think this is a really legit concern. And I think if NATO wants to have guarantees of their security in the future, they need to cooperate together and to increase their budget.
And building on that, how does this nuclear impasse tie into the escalating war in Ukraine? Are these fronts now strategically linked?
Well, I think the last all of the Bellic attacks that have been passing in the past few weeks, they're all related. I think also Ukraine knows that this is going to be escalating after the retaliation of Russia, and I think this is absolutely related. And I think Ukraine is going to be more dependent on the U.S. because they don't have any other ally apart from NATO, so they need to strengthen their relations with Germany and with the US, and I don't see any de-escalation of the situation in a close future. I think this is going to escalate.
And moving forward, do new sanctions from the US Senate actually deter Moscow, or do they push Russia further into China's strategic embrace?
I think this is going to push because 500% of tariff, not only on Russia, but every country that is going to be doing business with Russia is going to affect Russian economy. And Putin is not going to be, I mean, his strategy is not dependent on Russia's economy because they know they have a strong ally, which is China. And China is very well equipped. They are growing, they're getting stronger, and they're getting more allies. And also, Russia has the support from Iran, and they have ballistic missiles and other technologies such as drones. So I think Russia is not gonna be caring about the tariffs from Trump. I think they're gonna try to do a kind of Eastern NATO with all of its allies, including China. And I think they're gonna also increase their budget, and I think this is gonna escalate. I don't see any peace treaty in the near future.
And with that in mind, the diplomatic ties in ruins, is there any realistic path left for US-Russia dialogue, or are we in a new Cold War?
I think we're in a new Cold War, and this new Cold War is not gonna be inclusive from the US and Russia. I think this new Cold War is gonna be China is gonna be a crucial party in this new Cold War, and I don't think there's anything left for peace. All of the possibilities have been on the table. Actually, last week in Turkey, Russia and Ukraine were supposed to sign a treaty, but Ukraine strategically eliminated a lot of Russian arsenal. So these facts makes me realize that we're not dealing with an end of a war. We are just in the beginning of something bigger. Maybe it can take a lot of years. I don't think no one of the parties involved is going to be ready for a extreme or total war in the near future, but in a future, this can lead to a very difficult bellic times.
Thank you very much, Martin Sayrites, for joining us live from Ecuador. Now we have a breaking news. White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro has announced that a high-level U.S.-China meeting is expected to take place within the next 7 days. This meeting aims to address ongoing trade issues and strengthening economic ties between the two powerhouses. Both sides hope to find a common ground amidst rising tensions. U.S. President Donald Trump and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz held a friendly meeting at the White House, discussing Ukraine, trade, and military presence. Trump referred to Merz as a good representative of Germany and called him difficult, noting it is a compliment. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said U.S. tariffs on American car imports are hurting his country's economy. Germany imposes a 10% tariff on most American cars in response. Speaking during his visit to the United States, Merz called for open markets and free trade, saying they are the best path to mutual wealth. He also referred to Elon Musk's comment that the tariffs could lead to a recession later this year. While not wishing to get involved in U.S. domestic debates, Merz made it clear that Germany is looking for ways to lower these tariffs. Trump also confirmed that U.S. troops would remain in Germany and acknowledged Berlin's intention to increase defense spending. Here is what Trump has to say about defense spending.
I mean, I haven't discussed it very much. I know that you're spending more money on defense now.
Yes.
And quite a bit more money, and that's a positive thing.
Merz called the Nord Stream 2 pipeline from Russia to Germany a mistake and emphasized Germany's readiness to strengthening ties with the United States. Merz also shared his thoughts on applying pressure to Russia. Let's hear what he had to say.
Again, in a very strong position to do something on this war and ending this war. So let's talk about what we can do jointly, and we are ready to do what we can. And you know that we gave support to Ukraine and that we are looking for more pressure on Russia. The European Union did, and we should talk about that.
Following his discussion with the Trump at the White House, here's what Merz had to say to reporters about the Russia-Ukraine war.
Ich habe das sehr klar und sehr deutlich gesagt. Das liegt jetzt ganz besonders in der Hand der amerikanischen Regierung, in der Hand des amerikanischen Präsidenten, dazu beizutragen, dass dieser Krieg beendet.
The two leaders plan to meet again this month at the Group of Seven summit in Canada and a NATO meeting, where defense spending remains a topic. Now we have guest Martin Sayrites. He's an international affairs expert joining us live from Quito, Ecuador. Thank you, Martin, for staying with us. Is Trump's meeting with Friedrich Merz a signal that U.S.-Germany relations are stabilizing under his new term?
Absolutely. I think Merz is going to be following the CDU strategy, historical strategy as Angela Merkel. I don't think he's going to be changing any of his status quo, and I think Germany and the U.S. are going to be cooperating together. Even though he does not have a strong positive view about Donald Trump, because as we have said before, Donald Trump is interested only in U.S. interests, not even in allies' interests. So I think Merz he knows that the U.S. is not going to be cooperating 100% for Europe's interests. Rather, he knows that Germany is only dependent militarily from the U.S. because they're not able right now to defend themselves by themselves. So I think they know this, they acknowledge the fact that the US is going to be present if they want to give deterrence to the threat of the Russians. And I think he's going to be cooperating with Donald Trump, even though he knows they're going to be in a subordinated position.
Getting deeper into that, are the US and Germany headed for a trade showdown over car tariffs, or can Merz call for open markets shift Washington's stance?
Knowing Donald Trump's strategy, I don't think he's going to be so cooperative with helping economically its friends, because they didn't do it when the Germans needed help for the Russian dependence on electricity and on gas. And we know that the US never tried to help by supporting Germans with this issue. And I don't think Donald Trump is going to be supportive 100% in any economical concession or giving up on economical treaties that will not 100% support the US interests. I think the US is interested in strengthening the cooperation between NATO, because they know in the future they're going to be needing a strong NATO and they need to increase their budget.
I'd also like to touch on Elon Musk. Is Elon Musk right to warn that the tariff dispute could trigger a recession? And how much do these leaders listen to industry voices?
So we need to update that actually right now, Elon Musk is absolutely against the Trump administration because of the last policy of the economical reform that Elon Musk wanted to implement. And I think right now, basically, the private sector of the US is not going to be caring about the recession in the world or about any kind of tariff concession. I think they're going to be thinking about themselves. And we need to realize that the strategy of the US is actually very domestic. They're not government that they are applying their policies for the benefit of mankind. They try to do the best for their country and for the interests of the US. And yeah, I think that's the situation right now.
And with that in mind, Trump has confirmed US troops will stay in Germany. Is this a strategic signal to Russia or a political gesture to NATO allies, according to you?
Of course. I mean, the US wants to apply their hegemony throughout the world. And obviously, the US knows that Germany is a very strategic partner in the European Union, and they're not interested in giving up American bases in the European continent because, first of all, the threat from the Russians. I mean, the Russians are not willing to give up on anything. The situation is escalating and deteriorating. So for the US interest is to stay in Europe, and not only stay, to give more budget to NATO, to make NATO stronger. And I think right now this is going to happen.
Thank you very much, Martin Seirites, international affairs expert, for joining us live from Ecuador. Now we move on to our next story. The European Union has shown its full support behind the International Criminal Court after the US imposed sanctions on 4 ICC judges. Washington's move came in response to the court's arrest warrant against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and past cases involving US troops in Afghanistan. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the ICC must be free to act without pressure, while Council President Antonio Costa called the court a cornerstone of international justice. Among those sanctioned, judges from Uganda, Peru, Benin, and Slovenia, which has now called for the EU to immediately activate its blocking statute. That law prevents European companies from enforcing sanctions Brussels deems illegal. The ICC's governing body has condemned the sanctions as regrettable attempts to undermine judicial independence. The move comes as the court already faces scrutiny, including a UN probe involving Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan. Now we have guests joining us. Uh, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, he's a former diplomat, joining us live from Washington. Thank you for joining us today. What message does the US send to the world by sanctioning ICC judges? Is this a break from global rules or just defending its allies, according to you?
Well, this is not the first time that US has sanctioned, some authorities in the ICC. Earlier, they had sanctioned the chief public prosecutor, Karim Khan, and now they have gone to the next step of sanctioning 4 judges of the ICC. This is a serious development in many ways, because earlier the Western countries were acting in sync, in unison. They would consult each other, they would move ahead together, and they would not take steps against each other, which would be divisive. Now, since the time that the ICC has sanctioned Prime Minister Netanyahu, for example, for war crimes, and since the time that they said that US troops in Afghanistan, they can be sort of investigated for war crimes, there has been a lot of difficulties in the US to accept the jurisdiction and the judgments of the ICC. We have seen that even in the case of China on the Philippines issue of the islands. China refused to accept their judgment and their rulings. So it is making the international system, legal system also, a little weak. I think it is about time, since most of these systems were set up in 1945 and 80 years have elapsed. It is time to take a fresh look at all these organizations, all these institutions, and see what are the new realities of the world, where Bharat, India, is one of the more important nations of the world, where it is not even represented in the UN Security Council till today in the permanent membership. You have India with the maximum number of people in the world, the biggest population of the world, more than any other country, including China, and not represented appropriately or adequately in the United Nations. That is an anachronism for today. Now, Bharat also brings in a lot of traditional, systems, understanding, values, ancient values, wisdom, to a lot of these organizations. So for it to be more prominently taking a decision-making role or a policy-making role in many of these bodies will bring a lot of balance. For example, the rupture which is taking place between Europe and Washington, even on Ukraine today, because of vested interest, because of the deep state, because of the military-industrial complexes of various countries, the ruptures are there, and they have different policies on the same issue. India being a neutral country, now China is more involved in the war on the side of Russia, along with some other countries like Iran and North Korea. Similarly, the European countries are more involved directly in the war on basis of Ukraine. So India is a country which can come with a neutral perspective, which can come with a balanced perspective, which can lend a very balanced voice to decision making in a lot of these forums. So I think it is a serious evolution which is taking place in the world. It is also unprecedented in many ways, and it is not a good thing for the world, because the rule of law and the rule of order which had been imposed by the Western countries on the basis of their understanding of what is law, which may not have been acceptable to many other countries of the world, but at least there was some sort of understanding amongst themselves. That is also breaking to some extent now. So let us see how the things proceed from here.
I would like to touch on the legitimacy of ICC as well. Can the ICC maintain its legitimacy when major powers like the US openly defy or undermine its mandate?
Well, if you have not agreed to the full scope of the application of the judgments of the ICC, I forget the exact terminology which is used, But those countries which have not signed on to that level of acceptance of ICC judgments, those judgments, they do not need to abide by that. So you see, Netanyahu has been able to come here to the US on several occasions, even after this judgment was passed, without any problems. So it makes it quite sort of irrelevant. That is why you need to see what are the possibilities of new paradigms, new parameters, new institutions. You have a lot of technological development today. You have AI, which has developed and is developing at a very fast pace. Not only generative AI, but various other forms of fundamental AI. So you have to start looking at those aspects also and see how you can factor in and leverage all those advances into the new institutions which you have to create. So the time has come to create institutions which are more effective and which have a greater sort of acceptance by the Committee of Nations. So even the United Nations may need a recast or may need to be changed completely, because the League of Nations in 1945 was set aside because it failed to prevent world wars when it was created after World War I. So similarly, United Nations was created after World War II, and now we are in a situation where there's a European regional war practically. Though initially it started off as a Russia-Ukraine war, it has expanded its scope. So the institutions of the UN also are very much in doubt in terms of big question marks being raised. For example, the conduct of the WHO after the COVID epidemic was very dubious, in the sense of not investing China adequately and correctly for the origins of the virus. So they are under a lot of international pressure, which is contrary to the stated objectives on which they were formed, for the benefit of mankind, for the health of mankind. So similarly, the UN is not able to deliver or deliver to its briefs or charters or objectives. So how do you now re-envision a new world with some new organizations, which are, it's not going to be easy, because the world has become a very divisive place. You have the Islamic terrorism, which is a major threat for the world, which will become an increasing threat, the jihadi Islam. And then you have the China threat, the aggression by China. So these are two major preponderant threats which the world has also to factor in, how to deal with it. So to create new concepts, new ideas, new thoughts, new institutions is not going to be an easy venture, but it's a required venture.
And how might this developing crisis affect the future of the ICC, and could it push more countries to withdraw or distance themselves from this?
Yes, definitely that is a possibility, because if you have, the US actively campaigning against the ICC, and if they ask some of their aligned countries to withdraw their support to the ICC, that may happen. Some of the other countries like Israel may also want other countries to withdraw their support to the ICC. So the ICC as it is a semi-functional sort of organization, because it has not been able to implement any of its decisions in the recent past. So it will only become weaker as time passes, because even the US sanctioning 4 judges, while it has managed to get a lot of attention in the European capitals, I have not seen any great reactions from the other countries of the world so far. So they are not very interested anyway in what happens to the ICC, even if it is negative to the ICC.
Thank you very much, former Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, for joining us and sharing that insight. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.